Welcome to Pretty Lies and Alibis. Let's seek the truth and travel the long road to justice together. What you know, Alibiers, welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I'm Gigi. Good to have you here. It's Friday night. I'm going to get this episode done, hopefully, and out before I lay my head down. We are going to jump into a very busy day in the Robert Tellis trial. But first, if you're watching on YouTube, you know the drill. Don't forget to hit subscribe if you haven't already. Like the video, share it with your friends, and you can ring my bell if you want notifications of when I post new content. Click the little bell icon. Music fact of the day. What was the song Goodbye Yellow Brick Road about? Elton John said it was about his battle he had with being a country kid coming to town and originally being a little out of his depth. That is probably my favorite Elton John song besides Tiny Dancer. They're all good. Not sure if you can hear. We are in the middle of a monsoon. So if you hear a little noise in the background, I'm good. It's just pouring down the rain. We had Roberta Lee Kennett, Robert Tellis's alleged mistress. And we also had the infamous Detective Jappe, who the defense has brought up pretty much every single day since this trial began. We're going to get to their testimony and we're going to go through those who came before. I'm just going to show some of the body cam footage from today. A couple of the witnesses showed responding to the scene. The first three witnesses were all DNA experts. And instead of going through this testimony that's very technical, we're going to break down what was positive of everything they tested. The only positive identification of Robert's DNA they found was underneath the fingernails of Jeff's right hand. There were a couple of swabs that did have a mixture of two males or five people, but they were not able to make conclusions just due to the complexity of the data. On cross, the defense takes this opportunity to point out that every single swab from the car was negative. There was one mixture that was found in the car, but again, that profile could not be developed. The witness after that was Dan Cullen. He works for the Clark County Communications Office. He's the one that handles those public records requests for the media. He had worked with Jeff in years prior and knew him well. They were reporters together at the Las Vegas Sun before they both went their separate ways. Once they get a request, it's forwarded to the civil division of the DA's office, as well as the IT department. His office facilitates the request between the departments and the media. The subject of the records request, in this case, would be Robert and Roberta, were notified that a records request had been received. The documents get reviewed by the DA's office and the communications office before they are given to the person that requested. They can withhold things if needed, and the records that will be given to the requester are given to the subject of the request so they can review what's going to be sent. He got a request from Jeff through email on July 13th. He said he submits an open records request for Robert and Roberta, asking for all communications, including text messages between the two on Microsoft Teams, their office, and personal cell phones from January 1st, 2022 up to that current date. They show the email that was sent to Robert on August 8th, informing him of the request. And that email said the Review Journal had requested emails between him, someone named Michael Murphy, Rita Reed, who, just a reminder, is the person that ran against Robert and won in that reelection, as well as Roberta Lee Kennett. He also requested emails between Robert and Roberta, as well as text messages. The email says that they are processing the requests and expect to respond to the request within the next week or so. Robert responded back the same day saying that he would like to review what's being sent and asked him to advise when he would be able to do so. On cross, he asked, "How long would you wait to notify Robert about the request?" He said the initial steps are to communicate with the requester first, just to be sure everybody's on the same page of what's going to be sent. If there's anything that needs to be amended or added, they take care of that before they notify the subject of these requests. He said he would have called Jeff to ask for a specific end date and at some point would communicate with Robert about that request. The defense asked if it's uncommon for the subject to want to review what's going to be sent. The witness says not everybody does, but it's also not uncommon. There was a juror question. How many times did Jeff request communications? Was it weekly, monthly? The witness said he was an investigative reporter, so it was common for him to reach out and ask for those records, but he doesn't know exactly how many times. The next witness was Roberta Lee Kennett. As we all know, she was an employee of Roberts and also his alleged mistress. She worked at the office when the previous public administrator was working. She identifies Robert today. And Roberta, as well as the witness yesterday who did the surveillance, was pronouncing Robert's last name as Teus. I would assume she knows how to correctly pronounce his last name. We've been saying Tellus. When Robert came on, there was a lot of changes that she said were not well received. When asked if she considered herself to be friends with Robert, she said over time they did become friends. She learned that Jeff was writing a story including information about her from Robert. He gave her contact information for her to call Jeff. She did, and they talked very briefly. She said in May of 2022, Jeff came to the office after being invited by Robert, where Robert sat down for an interview. The article came out after that interview, and Robert wasn't happy about it. Roberta said personally she was upset, embarrassed, but also relieved at the same time. When asked if Robert liked Jeff, she said that he told her he hated him. This was after that story was written. And she said there were a lot of stories that followed. When asked if Robert's feelings about Jeff changed, she doesn't know. She said the stories were terrible and intentional, and they ruined Robert's career as well as his chances to run for reelection. So she assumed he would be very upset. After he lost the primary to Rita Reed, she was against the changes Robert had made in his time there. Robert didn't come to the office as much after he lost. He would work from home and mainly come in to sign checks or documents. She said also after he lost re-election, the two of them didn't communicate as much. Robert would respond to things that Jeff wrote. He would take it to social media. Roberta said she told him to stop, and the more you respond, the more articles would come out for no reason. Jeff made another public records request after the primary for communication between the same parties as he did the first time. The communications office notified them again that request had been made. They move on to Labor Day weekend. She had gone into work on that Friday the 2nd. At this point, she had been notified she was being transferred to another office and had come in to sign off on the 60 plus cases that she had. She saw that email asking to review the emails that would be sent to Jeff with his request. So she requested overtime to work on that instead of the cases she needed to sign off on. She had a deadline of when the emails needed to be reviewed by before they were released to Jeff. She talked to Robert about the new emails and created a Word document to share with him. And she said all she cared about were the vendors being named and exposed. She said she wasn't worried about anything in the emails personally between her and Robert. Robert didn't raise any concerns about these new emails, and she intended to go back to the office that weekend to work on those cases she needed to wrap up. And on Saturday morning, she was on Twitter and saw an article about Jeff being murdered, and she said it freaked her out. The morning after the murder, the day Jeff was found, she texted at 7:06 a.m. and said, "Oh my gosh, Jeff died." And then she sent Robert a screenshot of the story. She decided not to go into work because she said she was worried for her safety. His response to her was, "Holy crap." And she said it's all over Twitter. And then she told Robert she was not going into work. They pull up a text from her to Robert on September 6th asking if he received a response from Jeff or the district attorney. And then she said, "Just wondering." When asked about that, she doesn't remember what it was in regards to. And she said she doesn't know what Jeff she was referring to, but she did mean their district attorney. Another text to Robert after the murders: "WTF, please don't be driving your Yukon around for a while." When asked what she meant, she said it's what everyone else saw is the photo of the Yukon associated with the murder. She knew he had a similar Yukon. He had driven it to work a few times, and she knew it belonged to his wife. Robert responds to her, "Whoa, that's crazy." She said, "Please tell me your Yukon is not that color." Robert responds, "It's similar, if not the same." She asked if he has racks on his Yukon too, and she says, "Please tell me you don't. I'm freaking out." She tells the state at this point in time, she is starting to get nervous and also suspect Robert. He says, "Yeah, I think so. It's fine. I didn't do it." She asked Robert if he had special rims on the car and says she's very worried. She said, "It's not you, but they could try to use the vehicle as a way to suspect you." Robert says, "My car has all matching wheel patterns." She says, "I don't understand. Your rims look like the ones in the photo." Robert says, "I think they're saying the front doesn't match the back." Roberta says, "F, your car is identical." They ask her about if she installed an app called Trillion, which is an instant messaging app. She said she did, and that was at Robert's request, and they communicated through that. They did not go into anything in those messages, and the state was done. They didn't bring up to the jury this about the affair or question her, although later on, Detective Jappe does touch the subject lightly. On cross, the defense talks about the shakeup after Robert was elected, changes in overtime being eliminated to save tax dollars. She said that didn't go over well with employees. There were two other state coordinators. She said Rita Reed was not affected by that because she was on salary. She had concerns with Robert about his relationship with a certain real estate vendor, and real estate agents would come in with concerns that there was only one third party vendor. She and Robert were concerned about some of the contractors and the real estate agents. The defense asked if someone passes with no will, that there was a concern someone named Mr. Moore would come in and sell the property to someone with a conflict of interest, and then that person would turn around and sell that same property for a lot more. Just to make this make sense before we get there, Detective Jappe explains that one of the things that he was investigating about Compass at Robert's request was the realtors selling these properties to employees of Compass, which would have been a violation and not allowed. Roberta shared with Robert she was worried the heirs of these estates weren't getting money. She had concerns about one estate that was not worth much money. There was personal property in the residence that had value. They were trying to figure out how to handle the real property because there were no liquid funds to fix the place up. She said Robert's predecessor allowed Mr. Moore to come in and take over that property. She said Robert's predecessor had her say to this man they would love to have more cases like that if they had them. Later, the family made contact with her saying they had nothing. No personal property was given to them, and the house was foreclosed on. It was sold, and the heirs weren't getting anything. It was the third party vendors getting all the money. They talk about Compass Realty. She said they came around after the Independent Administrators Act. They started to see their names in legal filings. When they would file under the Independent Administrators Act, the PA's office wouldn't have anything to do with it. The PA's office would find out about those filings after the fact. This was common before Robert was elected. She said he tried to stop it, and there were calls about Robert from people who were angry about the changes he was making. She said the numbers were in the millions, and the defense asked, "Did Robert try to stop it?" Yes. Robert wanted to go to the district attorney to try to get this stopped. Robert spoke to Detective Jappe to try and put all this evidence together because Robert was conducting his own investigation. She and Robert talked about the suspicious transactions prior to his election. The defense says on direct, you were made aware that Jeff made the request for communications between you and Robert. You said Robert didn't express concern about these coming out. She says correct. Her concerns were just the vendors' names coming out, but Robert had no worries. He asked if she had a conversation with Robert leading up to the requests. She said they talked about the vendors not being happy. They were being talked about. Employees weren't happy. They were being talked about. The heirs and estate things being made public worried them. This is a confidential atmosphere they work in. The defense moves on about the video of the suspect walking outside Jeff's house before and after the murder. He says, we find out Jeff was killed on Friday, September 2nd. The video of the suspect was released on the 5th. He brings up the realtor yesterday who said they saw that video on the 2nd and asked her if that would have been consistent with her recollection. She said no, because I would have known Friday and I was at work. He asked if she recognized the suspect as Robert because you've known him since 2019. You've seen him walk around the office at properties. You didn't think it was him. She said, I don't look at people's gait. Her concern came when she saw the photo of the Denali. The defense asked, did he ever communicate to you that he was involved? Of course, she said he told her it wasn't him. On redirect, the state talks about in June of 2022, Robert lost that primary and he would be out of office in January 2023. The new PA would have been Rita Reed, and she could have reversed anything changed by Robert. Yes. His policies were ending 3 months after the murder. And the witness said that Rita made changes when Robert started working from home. They asked if there were any communications between the two that didn't have anything to do with work, and she said probably. You were interviewed by detectives on September 7th. You talk about the images of the suspect and the car. You said you don't pay attention to gait, but the car raised your suspicion. She said yes. She had seen that car parked in the employee lot, and his spot was right by where the employees enter. So she had seen that in person. The defense gets back up and says after Robert lost reelection, he kept working to try to preserve the estates. She said yes. Was he trying to stop the corruption? Again, she says yes. The next witness, Anthony Mariscal, officer with the Las Vegas PD. He was the first officer on scene after the neighbors call 911. You see him on body cam meeting with the neighbors in front of Jeff's. Really, this was just showing that body cam. He helped clear the residence to be sure nobody was inside. He also went inside the neighbor's house because they had seen a red sedan parked in front of Jeff's house the day he was murdered. They did have, you see him inside the garage. He's trying to obtain surveillance video that might show the red car that they mentioned. On cross, is it Metro's policy you wear body cams? Yes. The defense points out we don't know what happened prior to your arrival. No. The next witness, Bradley Freesey, he is a police sergeant with Las Vegas Metro. On September 2nd, he responded to Jeff's house the morning he was found. When he arrived, the tape was up. Only other officers were there. No citizens in the state asked, were there any real estate agents there? No. He talks about a CAD log, which is the log as the event is updated with what officers say over the radio. Dispatch essentially makes a transcript of all this. A log can organize the timeline of who shows up and what time and who leaves. They go through who shows up and then they show his body cam footage. On that body cam, he is heard telling somebody to stay on the other side of the street. And at the end, they talk about the coroner needing to be called. The next witness, Detective Jappe, who we have heard a lot about. He is with the Las Vegas Metro Police Department. He's in public corruption and criminal intelligence. He investigates anybody who holds public trust, such as officers, lawyers, judges, politicians. He, of course, knows Robert and identifies him in court. They talk about in March of 2022, the detective was asked to contact Robert about information he had about corruption in the probate court. This was 6 months before Jeff was killed. Their first communication was over the phone, and they discussed what Robert found through his own investigation. Robert then sent the witness an email outlining things, and then they met after that at some point in the beginning of March 22. Robert told the witness that Compass Realty and their employees were not notifying the next of kin. They were taking possession of these residences, filing false documents to the courts. not showing the actual value of the residences, and then selling the home to employees of Compass, which would be a violation. He took the allegations seriously. He said if someone dies and there's no one who can be contacted, the house goes into a vacant status. It'll just sit there. If somebody dies in their home without a next of kin and police go in and find them, they'll contact the PA's office. And at that point, the PA's office steps in to fix up the home and sell it. If the PA's office is not informed, a private real estate company can step in. If there's delinquent taxes or a lien put on the house for utility non payment, real estate companies or probate will be notified the house is vacant. Real estate companies can file with the courts to become an independent administrator. Independent means that the profit is expected to be over 300,000. If it's under 300,000, they can file to become a summary administrator. These are independent of the PA's office. This is how Compass fits in. They're inserting themselves essentially as an administrator. In summary, Robert accused Compass of stepping in, not notifying the next of kin, and then making profits by selling the property to employees. He said he watches the court's website to see what's being filed, how quickly they're flipping houses, and was the house sold multiple times in like two, three times, a rapid succession. The witness looked up Nevada statutes about notifying the next of kin. He explains we have certified mail here in the US where you have a signature which would prove somebody got the notice. But in Nevada, that was not required. When he looked into whether people were notified, he said he got mixed results. When Compass would file something with the court, the next of kin would be listed. So the witness reached out to the next of kin during his investigation. Some people said they were notified, others said they had no notification whatsoever. If a next of kin wasn't listed, the witness would try to find out who it was on his own and reach out to them. In May of 2022, 2 months after the witness starts talking to Robert and investigating, he became aware of the articles that Jeff had started putting out about Robert. The witness said Robert was upset about the articles, and he told the witness he was upset, and he said he thought Jeff was writing those just to sell papers and didn't want to tell the full story. Robert told the witness to look at a website where he shared his side of the story. The state points out there is an election going on when these stories are coming out. On May 16th, Robert approaches the witness about Roberta Lee Kennett and said she was getting texts that were harassing and asked him to do something about it. Robert sent the witness screenshots of those text messages, and the witness forwarded those to the DA's office to see if it fit any kind of harassment or annoying, threatening phone call crimes. It did not rise to the level of any criminal action. He told Robert, and Robert understood. June 2022, the witness finds out Robert lost his primary and would be out of office in 6 months. August of 2022, a month before the murder, the witness is still investigating Compass, and he's put in contact with other members of the PA's office, Rita Reed and Ashley Goodwin. They tell the witness they got information that Robert was receiving kickbacks. A week later, the witness talks to Kimberly McMahon. She was a former lieutenant in the Metro Police. She shares information about the kickback, and she says through the PA's office, when they take possession of a home and it's ready to be sold, they can pick the realtor to sell the house. The allegation was historically the PA's office would use rotating realtors, but Robert approached this woman and asked to receive 30% of the 7% commission she received. This lieutenant, by the way, was a realtor. In return, he would give her more houses to sell. That was the allegation. He investigated both allegations between Compass and Robert simultaneously. They had names of multiple realtors in the PA's office that they had been using, and the homes sold since Robert took office. And they saw a pattern of multiple realtors being used. And around the time that Miss McMahon said the house had been taken away from her, the houses seemed to go to one realtor. That one realtor didn't have many sales before, but after he met Robert, there was a huge increase in the number of homes he sold for the PA's office. The witness gets a pen register and begins surveillance on Robert. Moving on to the day of the murder, there was no surveillance on Robert that day because Robert had been under surveillance the day before. They don't like to do one day after the other. He said, "We drive the same car. It's the same person in there, and they don't want the subject to get suspicious." The state says the burning question: did you go to Jeff's house the day he was murdered? No. The witness did attend a briefing with Metro about the murder. It was at their headquarters, and he provided the historical records and the pen register to the lead detective in the murder investigation. The state asked, "Are you playing a role in this homicide investigation? Are they asking you to ride shotgun?" No. As of September 2nd, do you stop your investigations into Robert or Compass? No. Moving forward to September 7th, he's contacted by an investigator and they meet because Robert was being interviewed. Robert had had the buckle swab prior to him getting there, as well as his pants taken. The witness did not participate in the search warrant. He's with the investigator as they drop Robert off at his house after all this is completed. They find out the DNA is a match underneath Jeff's fingernails for Robert, and he knows now at this point Robert's going to be arrested. He was in the vicinity of Robert's house and was asked to call Robert to talk him into coming out and surrendering. They asked him because he had a relationship with Robert. They were doing this investigation together. The witness is also a member of the crisis negotiation team and had been from 2016. In between there, he had a 2-year break, but had a lot of experience in this area. He gets Robert on the phone and spends around 2 hours talking to him. Robert told the witness he wanted to hurt himself and progressed to he couldn't leave because he was stuck in his tub. He explains robots were sent in to confirm this. He never stepped foot inside Robert's house. SWAT goes in to get him out and he's given medical care. The witness approached the ambulance, which he said is typical for a crisis negotiator. They kind of debrief with the suspect and ask, "Is there anything we could have said or done to make this go smoother?" He also wanted to see if he was okay because they had worked together for around 6 months on this with Compass. Robert then is taken away. He's asked, "Did you go in his house after he's taken away?" No. He still continues to investigate both Compass and Robert. In February of 2023, he determines there wasn't anything to support Robert had gotten kickbacks, but they do pass what they had to the FBI so they could do a secondary analysis on it. The FBI concludes the same as the witness did, and the witness does not take the case to the DA's office against Robert. He does send the case to the DA's office for Compass. He was trying to get a search warrant for more evidence. In the end, Compass was using loopholes, and the way the statutes are written, there wouldn't have been a criminal prosecution. And the state says, for example, since they didn't use certified mail, it couldn't be proven the heirs were or were not contacted. Also, the witness said Compass provided documentation about the sales of these homes. The state asks about the pen register in respect to the day of the murder. In the morning, he sees Robert's phone about 8:30 to early afternoon, only had incoming calls and text messages, nothing outgoing. The next time there's outgoing stuff is in the early afternoon. The whole time the phone is pinging around Robert's residence. On cross, Robert had been exonerated of the allegations about receiving kickbacks. Yes. The defense asked if this investigation was started by Kimberly McMahon meeting with you. He said that was part of it. There was a report on August 17th, 2022 of a surveillance log generated. Defense points out Robert's doing normal stuff, picking up his kids, getting food. Yes. He asked if there was a surveillance report made the day before the murder. Yes. Was it provided to the DA's office? The witness says yes, and the defense lets the witness know you're subject to recall and you're willing to come back and speak with us. Yes. The defense says that McMahon claims when the solicitations from Robert occurred, she was a lieutenant at the police station. He says he believes so. It was around that time. The defense gets the witness to say they would not have known about Compass unless Robert had said something. The defense says you reached out to Detective Gaddis on September 4th to inform that you felt you had information that would implicate Robert. The witness says, I don't think I said implicate. I passed on what I had. She was the case agent, so he was just giving her what he had in his possession. The defense brings up Robert is being detained for the purpose of getting his DNA and also his pants on September 7th. You got involved in that interview with Robert in homicide? Yes. The defense says you talked to him about the investigation into him, and the witness says, no, I was updating Robert on the investigation into Compass. The defense says the guy's having his pants taken off, DNA is taken, and you're talking about Compass. The witness says this was after we were in a room together. It was more small talk. Afterwards, he leaves the residence by SWAT. Are you in the ambulance with him alone? Nope. There were several other people in there. Since that time, have you had contact with Robert? No. The last witness of the day, Levi Hancock, he's with Las Vegas PD SWAT. At least 20 SWAT officers responded the day Robert was arrested. He knew Robert was on the phone and refused to come out. That conversation was close to 2 hours. Prior to SWAT arriving, they had concerns he was harming himself. SWAT arrives and he was told they saw movement on the second floor. They use robotics and a drone to be sure he's not trying to do anything that would hurt authorities. The robot went into the master bedroom on the second floor. He said that it was very cluttered in there and it couldn't go any further. So they flew a drone into the house where they saw Robert in the bathtub. Robert appeared to drop a knife to the floor. They thought at this point he's unarmed and he's covered in blood from self inflicted wounds. SWAT goes in up the stairs and into the bathroom. The witness was in first. Robert was told to drop any weapons he had, and Robert made a gesture that the weapon was on the ground. They render aid, and the witness explains that they have a physician that volunteers their time, and also some of their SWAT officers are EMT. They wrap Robert in a sheet to get him down the stairs. Then he was put on a stretcher. They have body cams on their helmets. They do play it. We really don't see much. You do hear them talking to Robert. I think because of the amount of blood there in the bathroom, it probably just wasn't safe to put on TV or stream online. On cross, the defense points out Robert lost a lot of blood and asked if there was any indication he had ingested drugs or alcohol. The witness said the physician thought he may have ingested something, so they gave him Narcan in case he did. That was it for today. So we've gone past the number 20 that I think the state said as far as witnesses they had, but we're probably getting close to the lead investigator. And I think this case could wrap up by next week at some point. I think Robert taking the stand is what we're all waiting on just to see how that goes. It's going to be a very interesting week. I'll be live streaming on Monday and every day this trial's still going on. Come watch with us. I appreciate the mods who are in there for hours every day, making sure it is a safe chat, a fun chat that stays focused. So thank you for your time in doing that. I hope you guys have a good weekend. We will see you Monday.